show.
Welcome to episode 71 of the Gluttons For Punishment Podcast, or GFP, a Toronto Maple Leafs and NHL podcast hosted by Michael Lepore and Anthony Bruno. He's Lepore, I'm Bruno. Thank you so much for listening and watching us on YouTube as well. We are nearing the start of training camp.
Let's go.
Across the NHL. Very exciting times, but there isn't too much going on leading up to the season, but there is big news in Leafland. Rasmus Sandin and the Leafs are not close in contract negotiations. We are going to discuss that on this podcast. We are going to get into Connor McDavid versus Sidney Crosby, Auston Matthews versus Alexander Ovechkin, and maybe some more fun topics. So please stay tuned till the very end, because you are not going to want to miss this episode. But before we get into all that fun stuff, it is time to welcome in my partner in crime, Mr. Michael Lepore. How you doing, man?
Anthony Bruno, doing very well. As I often say, there's no place I'd rather be than here with you recording a podcast. Episode 71 of the GFP Podcast. 71. It might be the darkest number in the history of the Toronto Maple Leafs. I can already hear people saying, 67. 71, worn by three players in the history of the franchise. Mike Foligno, the worst helmet in the history of the Toronto Maple Leafs. David Clarkson, the worst contract in the history of the Toronto Maple Leafs. And Nick Foligno, the worst trade deadline signing in the history of the Toronto Maple Leafs. So let's take that number 71 and throw it in the trash and not allow a single Maple Leaf player ever again to don that number.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, light that number on fire. Holy. I didn't even think of all that. Like when you said 71, it wasn't even registering in my brain, but then you bring up Clarkson and Nick Foligno. That trade deadline acquisition was just horrendous for what the Leafs gave up and the production that 0 goals, Lepore, for Nick Foligno. 0
for a first round pick. To be fair, Mike Foligno was a good Leaf. He had that big overtime winner. We're just making fun of his helmet because it's an ongoing joke in the hockey world.
We're still gonna light that number on fire.
I've been wondering about that helmet. Like you've like back then, like the CCM, the Bauer, the Cooper, right? Like Messier's helmet. That, like even the Jofa guys who wore Jofa, the Gretzky one that was like paper. But his helmet, it was like, where did he even see that? Or like, where did he even, like, there's probably a story. Someone comment down below if you know the history of that helmet or why he wore that bucket. But I've always been kind of confused. Like, why did he use that helmet? How did that become an option?
I think we got to get Mike Foligno on the podcast. We
Let's
should get
go.
both Folignos. We don't know, the whole family, even, what's the dude that plays on Minnesota? What's the other brother's name?
Oh, that's
Marcus Foligno.
Marcus Foligno.
Get the whole family on the podcast.
Yeah.
All right, Lepore, let's get right into this.
Let's go.
Starting things off with Rasmus Sandin. So a story from Sportsnet yesterday showed us that Louis Gross, Rasmus Sandin's agent, talked to Sportsnet and said, Lepore, quote, "Negotiations are going nowhere," unquote. With Rasmus Sandin and the Toronto Maple Leafs, there's a logjam on defense. We've talked about this on a previous podcast. It appears that the top 6 is set, right? You have Morgan Rielly, TJ Brody, Jake Muzzin, Justin Hall, Timothy Liljegren, and Mark Giordano. Those are your 6. So unless somebody's getting moved out, as things stand right now, there really isn't room for Rasmus Sandin. Now, if you're Anthony Bruno, and I'm assuming Michael Lepore, you probably want to see Rasmus Sandin in the top 6, because I think he's a good player. He does have his faults. Every defenseman isn't perfect, unless you're Cale Makar or Victor Hedman. But it's an interesting situation right now for the Leafs, because they got to make a move here. Now, you can go over the salary cap ceiling in the offseason by 10%. But something has to be done here, because he's the only remaining restricted free agent on this team that hasn't signed yet. So, Lepore, what are your thoughts on this Sandin situation?
I'm pissed, Bruno, because it seems like quite often we get in these situations as Toronto Maple Leafs fans where, like, can a guy not just sign and like sign for a deal that's fair and works for both sides? So to that point, I want him traded. a message has to be sent. These kids now hold far too much leverage as RFAs, or at least they play that card that they have all the leverage. Well, you can be traded. We can blast you into the sun to a shittier losing organization. So at this point, I want Sandin to be traded. Now, I'm not a fly on the wall. I don't know the actual discussions. So if he is going to sign and he's just holding out, and maybe the Leafs know that, who knows? But from what I can see, it's a piss off, man. At the end of the day, I'm a Leafs fan. I don't really give a shit specifically about the players. They come and go. So in this case, I'm not going to take the player side. And I'll ask you this, Bruno. See, what can he be asking for?
Like, I was going to get into that because the belief is, at least according to the article by Luke Fox on sportsnet.ca, is that they offered him a similar deal to the one they gave Liljegren. 2 years, $2.8 million. So 1.4 AAV.
Sure.
So apparently he wants a lot more than that because he thinks he's better than Timothy Liljegren.
Yeah. I mean,
which you could argue he is, but I don't think he's that. Honestly, from what we saw from both of them last year, I don't think Sandin proved that he's that much better than Liljegren.
Yeah, we were all shocked. Like, I remember having discussions in the preseason last year where we thought Sandin was like hard in the lineup, and we were kind of hoping Liljegren would get in. And we saw a lot more of Liljegren this year, and he created a great partnership with Giordano, so it looked awesome. But as far as Sandin goes, he's played, I think, like 88 games in the NHL and has something like 25 points or 28 points. Like, what can you be asking for? So the only thing to me that this is at a standstill is because he's thinking of this comparatively somehow. There's a deal they're offering him where they're saying, no, I want at least what so-and-so makes, or I want more than what so-and-so makes. And to your point, Liljegren, like, that was the assumption. When Liljegren signed, I think Leafs fans across the board kind of thought, well, Sandin's going to sign a similar deal. Kind of like when like Kapanen and Janssen signed. It was just like, okay, yeah, makes sense. They'll both sign for the same thing. They're different, but at about the same level. And again, I think people thought it was the same thing for these two young D-men, but confusing, man. Confusing. Again, what could he possibly be asking for? It can't be that much higher in terms of AAV than Liljegren's getting. And at this point, like, what term could you be asking for? And number one, maybe you wouldn't even want term because you're hoping to light it up in the next year or the year after or whatever and sign then for your big contract. So it's confusing. It's a piss off for Leafs fans because, you know, we want this stuff wrapped up well before the season starts. But if I'm Kyle Dubas, I take action on this. Not going to put up with this. And at the end of the day, he's a good young player. He's 22 years old. You're going to get something for him. Like, I expect a body. If it's, say, like a rebuilding team, this and that, I expect something back. Like, who's to say they can't package Sandin up with something else nice and bring in like a piece, like a real piece. So I don't know, man. Again, these kids think they have the leverage, but they're not supposed to. You have the leverage when you're a UFA, not when you're an RFA. But they play the card like they do. So it's frustrating for fans.
Yeah, he doesn't have a ton of leverage because he's not eligible for arbitration at this point. And,
right.
You know, like I mentioned, the Leafs 6-man D unit is pretty much set in stone at this point, unless somebody gets moved out, whether it's Justin Hall or Jake Muzzin, you know, something else we've talked about on a previous show in terms of, you know, whether they should make a trade on the blue line. But going back to Sandin in this contract, like, do you think he's asking for like a 5-year deal? Like, is that the thing that's holding this thing up? Because I can't imagine he is. Because like you said, I almost feel like the bridge deal maybe makes more sense where he can get into a top 4 role. Like, let's say he's waiting it out and seeing if like Hall gets moved or Muzzin or one of these guys get moved. He, you know, then goes into that role, has a career season. And, you know, not to say that he's going to have the best season of his career at 22 years old, but he's going to have a really good season, up his value. And then when he signs that next contract coming out of this bridge contract, then he could really cash in. Right? Because if you're going to sign a long-term deal at this point, I mean, well, how much can the Leafs possibly be willing to offer this guy on a long-term deal? Because he hasn't really proven anything.
Yeah, like a 5 times $3 million or something. Like, well, what could he possibly be asking for it? No, I don't get it, man. I don't. He's not a young kid who, I guess this would more likely happen with a forward where okay, he scored like 25 goals or something. So there's a crazy high ceiling. So the agent's coming in with that. And you'd understand that, whether it's term or AAV. But I don't get it. And like, he hasn't been like, I don't want to say he hasn't been that good, because like I like the player, but like I remember that Montreal series, he looked bad. Like he was turning it over,
pushed around in that.
He
series.
was right. There was one goal specifically, I remember Montreal scored, where he took a hit that led to the turnover, and it was like, you're not ready. Like it was one of those plays where you just see it as a fan and you're thinking to yourself, this guy's not ready for the show. And like from what we saw last year, he played like 50 some odd games last year. And again, like he had injury problems.
51 games and was injured again.
There you go. So again, more points about it. Do you remember we went into last year? Funny, like how we can look back at this stuff. We thought Riley on the power play was done. We're like, Rasmus Sandin is quarterbacking the power play. This is not a thing, because I just said he played like shit against Montreal, but I remember he also looked good leading the power play. That didn't happen.
And the Leafs had the number one power play
exactly
with Morgan Riley.
That's my point. His agent and him can't be sitting there, well, I lead the power play. Well, no, you don't. Like, I don't. If anything, you got removed from it, because I assumed at the start of the season last year, the idea was to have him be that guy. I don't get it. I want him gone, man. I want to see a deal.
Yeah, fair enough. I just think that, what's frustrating Sandin the most I don't even think it has anything to do really with the finances. And sure, that's obviously a factor. He wants to get paid what he thinks he deserves to get paid, but it's his role. Like, he doesn't want to keep this same role that we've seen for the last couple of seasons, where he's in and out of the lineup. He's not a full-time member of the 6-man D unit. He's not a member of the top 4. And now you can come back and say, listen, Sandin, you haven't proven anything. But I think he, wants a chance. He wants a chance to be there game in and game out and not have that thought in the back of his head, like, oh, I'm going to be taken out of the lineup for Hull tonight, or Liljegren's going to be in the lineup tonight. Like, he wants to go into the season knowing that he is a full-time member of this team and he has a chance to play all 82 games. And unless one of these veterans get moved out, that doesn't look like it's going to happen right now.
At the end of the day, that's a loser. I have two arguments for that. Number one, that's a loser mentality. Like, okay, come in and prove yourself. Like, we're here to win. We want to win. If you deserve a spot, you'll get the spot. So you shouldn't be worried about that. And number two, just on the whole broad scope of him getting an opportunity, he was Dubas's pick. There was the famous thing of like Dubas winking at the camera after he drafted him, played in the Sioux. Dubas wants him to succeed. He really wants him to succeed. This is his boy. I don't know.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Because we all know how much Dubas loves all these guys who played for the Sioux, right? And then here's the one guy where it's, things are being held up right now. And it's a standoff, and the Leafs are probably saying, listen, what the hell do you think we're going to pay you here? Like, we want to give you the exact same deal we gave Liljegren. Who do you think you are? You think you're Nick Lidstrom? It's like you said, Lepore. He's played 88 games in the NHL, 6 goals, 28 points. Like, I like Rasmus Sandin. I've said this on plenty of shows. I think he's a really good player. But at this point, I mean, I just don't know what he could possibly be asking for. Like, he might hold out. That's kind of the only leverage he has. He could pull the Nylander from a few years ago, where he holds out and doesn't sign until December.
That's pretty idiotic. That'd be pretty idiotic on his end, because unlike Nylander, the Leafs don't need Sandin.
Exactly. They needed Nylander.
Yeah. Like, we're talking about a 30-35 goal guy. Like, I mean, Sandin, okay, you just made our decision of who's in the lineup easier. That's it. You don't have this big leverage. We're not going to be going into the season and the Leafs have like an average start. Man, we really need Sandin. Like, no.
It's time for a quick break for a word about Manscaped. Success is when preparation meets opportunity, and Manscaped's Platinum Package will make sure you're prepared when opportunity strikes. Join the 6 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped by going to manscaped.com for 20% off and free shipping using the code GFP20. Lepore, the Platinum Package is simply the way to go.
Platinum Package, Anthony Bruno, is unstoppable. Let me tell you, everyone, I'm a proud Italian, but as an Italian, I have hair growing in places where I wish it didn't grow. And one of those places is the nose. And I've tried a lot of these trimmers and they all suck. They just make a loud noise and do nothing. I tried the Weed Whacker from MANSCAPED. A+, knocked it all out quickly, didn't pull on any hairs. Absolute great product. And that's only one of the pieces of this amazing package from Manscaped. So go to manscaped.com for 20% off and free shipping with the promo code GFP20.
You got the Lawnmower 4.0, the Weed Whacker, as Lepore mentioned, the boxers, the body wash, and the shampoo.
Going forever,
so many
man.
Great products. The deodorant. The list goes on and on. Listen, if you're a man and you want to be at your best, then you need these products from Manscaped. You heard it here from the GFP Podcast. So once again, go to manscaped.com for 20% off and free shipping using the code GFP20. That is 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com using the code GFP20. I'll ask you this, Lepore, because you said that you want to see him get traded, which is totally fair. Is there anyone on this Leafs blue line that you would want to see essentially taken out of their role and have Sandin inserted into that role? Whether it's Hall, whether it's Muzzin, even Giordano or Liljegren. Like, do you think Sandin is better than any of those guys at this point?
The deal, this one's complicated. So about him getting traded, or I should say like another player getting moved to make a spot for him, is how it could possibly help the team. So in the two that stand out, and it's no secret, and there's been rumors about them getting traded, are Justin Hall and Jake Muzzin. Okay. Today, as it stands, I do not think that Rasmus Sandin is a better defenseman than Jake Muzzin, but Jake Muzzin makes a lot of money. So if we are able to make that move, put Sandin in the lineup and free up cash to make either some other part of the team stronger, I'd probably be down, depending on what's coming back. But I'd have confidence in the staff that they'd figure something out that looks nice. Justin Hall, yeah. Like, I mean, I think most Leafs fans would agree that if we could dump Hall and just make a swap for Sandin and maneuver around the lineup how we have to, I think I'd do that one. You?
Yeah, like I think he's a better player than Justin Hall as well. And maybe, you know, some of the analytics people are going to start yelling at me and yelling at both of us, being like, oh, Justin Hall actually had, you know, good underlying numbers and all that. Listen, we're stats guys. I like stats too, but I've watched Justin Hall play, man. I just don't love the player. And I think Sandin just has more upside. I think he's a more explosive player. The problem with Sandin, and we touched on this, his durability. Like, he's a small guy. And listen, there are small guys in the league that make it work. There's small guys on the Leafs who make it work, like Mitch Marner. Okay, he's never injured. He never gets hit. But Sandin, there's been moments throughout his young career where he has looked overmatched physically. Yeah. And you said it, especially in that Montreal series a couple of years ago. You know, he's been injured. He can't seem to stay healthy. And that's an issue. And that's something that maybe the Leafs are worried about. Like, this dude is, you know, under 6 feet, about 175, 180 pounds. He's not a big guy. And maybe they're worried about that. You know, if you're going to swap him in for Justin Hall, who's like 6'3", 220, Jake Muzzin, right? 6'2", 215, 220. Like, these are big guys, right? And if you're going to swap in Sandin, who's a smaller guy, you better be really, really sure about this guy moving forward.
Yeah, at this point, I mean, if he does go in, who does partner be? I mean, it depends on who's coming out, but I think, I don't know.
That's another issue, because Dubas has said, and I believe Keefe is on the, I don't know if Keefe's on the record either, but Dubas has said that he wants him to play his natural side, which is the left side. And there's a logjam on the left side for Leafs defensemen right now. So that's a tough situation. It's like, who would he play with, right?
Yeah. Because I mean, like, are Brody and Riley going to become a thing again? I mean, Liljegren and Giordano look so good as the third pair. So, I mean, that's not budging. And you have Muzzin and Hall. So, I don't know. I mean, because you can't put like Sandin with Riley. I mean, you could put him with like a Brody, but then it's like, okay, well, then what are you doing? And again, it depends who comes out, man. Depends who comes out. You know, it'd be amazing if some kid just came in at camp, maybe like Niemela or something, and just like, fuck this, and goes ball to the wall and enters the lineup. And it's like, sorry, Rasmus, you're gone. And this is our new top pairing D.
It's a possibility. Both those guys were defensemen of the tournament, I believe, at the World Juniors.
Yeah.
One year was Sandin, the next year was Topi Niemela.
There was
Finland.
there was one year where the Leafs had, it was something crazy. It was like they had the East Coast Hockey League Defenseman of the Year, like the CHL Defenseman of the Year, the World Junior Defenseman of the Year. I forget who they were, but everyone getting all pumped up. It's like, yeah, let's celebrate because a Leafs player won the East Coast Hockey League Defenseman of the Year.
Yeah. I mean, listen, it's always good to get excited when your prospects win awards and they do good things at the World Juniors, or they set records in junior or in their, European league or whatever. But yeah, as of right now, I mean, the Leafs defense core is pretty much set. I kind of agree with you, Lepore. It kind of looks like they're going to trade him at this point, especially if they can't work out a contract. But we'll see what happens, because I like him. Like, I want him to be with the Leafs long term. I think he's a really good player, but sometimes things just don't work out the way you want them to work out. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. And again, we drafted him. The whole, like, we had a laugh, the whole Sandin thing. Played in the Swedish defenseman.
It was all lining up.
It was all lining
completely out the window.
Oh, yeah, because that never happens with the Leafs.
Oh, God. All right, Lepore, you want to move on from this, or is there anything else you want to get off your chest about Sandin?
No, sure. We'll just maybe have to do a podcast tomorrow when hours after we hit send to this recording, Rasmus Sandin signed a 3-year deal with the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yeah, that's an absolute lock to happen. I'm going to go post the podcast, and literally like 3 minutes before, we're going to get all these notifications that he's signed. So
that's why we're doing
it.
That's why we're doing it, because we're trying to like give those vibes to get him signed, to get Rasmus in the lineup.
I just hope the news breaks after we post the podcast. That would be ideal.
Or he's been traded. Yeah, it'll be either one. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. All right, man. Let's move on to our next conversation here. So, there's been a lot of lists that have been thrown out throughout the offseason. Like, you see the NHL and Sportsnet and TSN and, all these rankings. Who's the best player in the game? Who's the best centerman? Who's the best right winger? Who's the best defenseman? And then they gave all these top 10 lists, top 5 lists, people throwing out era adjusted stats and all that. So I think we can all agree at this point, especially after the season he just had, that Connor McDavid is the best player in the world.
Yep.
Right, Lepore?
He's got the belt.
He's the best player in the world. Now, moving forward, okay, because Connor McDavid has had a hell of a career from a statistical standpoint through his first 7 years in the league. He hasn't won anything in terms of Stanley Cups. He's won some Hart trophies and some Art Rosses, and we all know what he's done just in terms of pure point production. But moving forward, Lepore, let's compare him to Sidney Crosby. Okay? Do you think that at the end of his career, Connor McDavid, do you think he will have a better career than Sidney Crosby?
If I'm being perfectly honest, the first answer that pops in my head is no. And Connor McDavid is an absolutely unbelievable player, a once-in-a-lifetime talent. I love watching him. And call me a homer and call me biased because I just love Sid. But there's something about Crosby, and especially looking back, Crosby in his prime, and when the Penguins were winning cups, I hate to be all cheesy and say like, oh, he had like that X factor or that winning mentality, but he did. And the best analogy, or a very good analogy, is if aliens were invading and we had to beat them at hockey and we could put a team together with any players we wanted, who would be the first player we pick? If someone said to me, Sidney Crosby in their prime or Connor McDavid in their prime, I would take Sid. Now, I think McDavid's going to be he's probably going to put up more points than Crosby will in his career because he's just a stats machine. And I say that as a compliment. The guy's incredible. But there's that weird thing with Sid that he does a lot of things right. And I heard someone talking about Crosby once, and they said that the misperception with Sid is that they think a lot of people see him kind of like a McDavid. Like he's just like super talented, phenom, whatever. And the guy argued that that was incorrect. He was saying that Crosby is actually the best grinder in the league. He's like, if you watch him in the corners, watch him with his feet, watch how he uses his body. That's what he's incredible at. Oh, and he just also happens to be the most talented player in the league. He has the best vision in the league. So it's for those factors that I think when we're done here, we're gonna look back and think Sid had the better career. And if we're being black and white about it, let's be honest, it's gonna be about hardware. It's gonna be about Stanley Cups. I mean, it's tough to win cups. It really is. Like the timing has to be right, the team has to be right. You have to be lucky. So as far as McDavid goes, I mean, if we had to put an over-under on how many Stanley Cups he's going to win on his career, and he's got a lot of time. Like I'm saying, totally positive. If someone told me McDavid retires with 5 cups, I'd be like, oh, okay, I can totally see it. But if someone gave me an over-under right now of 3 Stanley Cups and 2 Conn Smythes, I'd probably bet no. That he's not going to get there. And people are going to point to like Art Ross trophies, Hart trophies, and Sid lost out on a few of those because of his injuries for what they thought were the concussion problems. But I'd go Sid, man. I don't know. And again, that's not me even necessarily saying that, oh, I think he's a way better player. I just think looking back when they're building like the Mount Rushmore, as they say, where it's like, Gretzky, Lemieux, Howe, or and like if a 4th guy can get in there. I think when it comes to inserting someone, it's about championships. It's about Conn Smythe trophies. So I think at the end of the day, I think even throw little things in. Like I always say with athletes, the best athletes seem to have like a moment, like a single moment that you look back on and you were like, of course that happened.
Like the golden goal.
The goal I was going to say. So the golden goal for Sid, Babe Ruth calling his shot. Michael Jordan hitting the winning shot against Utah, or the flu game, or you could have a 1-hour podcast talking about incredible moments by Michael Jordan. It's things like that. So Sid has the golden goal. And this is more, I'm going to the objective side as to like how we judge these guys. Like Gretzky and Lemieux had 87 Canada Cup, Gretzky and Lemieux. Gretzky had Game 7 against Toronto when he scored the hat trick, stuff like that. So
yeah,
I'm going to have to go
David hasn't had that moment yet.
No, and he might. I mean, again,
it could come.
It could come. It's a total discussion, and he got robbed of an Olympics because of COVID. So we could have told that story of how McDavid completely dominated in Olympic games, and he probably would have because he's the best player in the world by far. But as it stands right now, he's got a lot of work to do. A lot of work to do, as far as I'm concerned, as far as the debate goes versus Sidney Crosby.
Yeah, like in terms of pure talent. And even just like aesthetically, just like how they play the game and how honestly, just how like beautiful they both play the game. Like you could argue that McDavid is better in that respect.
Yeah.
He's just more talented, more explosive. The way he moves out there, it's almost unlike anything we've ever seen before. Like essentially the greatest skater, the greatest skater with the puck that maybe we've ever seen in the history of the sport. And he has all the stats to back it up. The guy's won, I believe, 2 MVPs. I'm not sure how many Art Rosses McDavid has won, but he's won a few of those as well.
Yeah.
And one thing that people forget about Sidney Crosby, okay, so I'm just looking at his trophy cabinet right now. Obviously, he has the 3 Stanley Cups, 2 Conn Smythe trophies. He's won a Hart Trophy, Lester B. Pearson, which is now the Ted Lindsay Award, I should say.
He's only got 1 Hart.
I believe he has 2 Harts.
Lepore. I was gonna say I thought it was 2. Even then, 2 for Sid.
Yeah, I know. Man. 2 Hart. Like if you were to ask someone like off the street, right on the street, like how many Hart trophies does Sidney Crosby have right now?
5.
I think they'd all say, yeah, exactly, like 4 or 5.
He probably
Sidney Crosby.
Just bad timing in terms of like regular season, like those years Ovechkin was scoring like 50, 60 goals. He's kind of like, oh, you got to give it. Like even right now, this year is an example with Matthews. I think most people would agree that McDavid is a better player than Auston Matthews, but he scored 60 goals. You got to give him the Hart. Like it's just how it goes.
Exactly. Just one of those seasons, right? Even going through Crosby's career, like from 2010 to 2013, he played 41 games, 22 games, and 36 games.
Ouch.
He missed a boatload of games over those 3 years, essentially right in the middle of his prime, like right after Pittsburgh won that first Stanley Cup. But one thing I was going to say about Sid that people forget, this guy's won 2 Rocket Richard trophies.
Yep.
2 Rocket Richard trophies, because we all view Crosby And, we view McDavid in the same light as a playmaker first. They make the players around them better. Connor McDavid hasn't won a Rocket Richard yet. Sid, that first Rocket he won, he had 51 goals back in 09-10. And then the second Rocket he won actually came in 2016-2017. Nice. When he scored 44 goals. That must have been a down year for goal scoring. But it just shows like Sidney Crosby's the total package, whether it's making players around him better, whether it's scoring goals, whether it's winning championships, whether it's doing the little things like grinding in the corners, how you said, Lepore, like there's people who view this guy as, like the best grinder in NHL history, which is crazy to say about a guy like Crosby, but it's true. So I'm right there with you, man. If I had to pick who is going to have the better career when it's all said and done, based on entire body of work, accolades, all that stuff, it is Sidney Crosby at this point. I'd still go with Sid over Connor McDavid.
2 Olympic gold medals too. Again, like I say how it's all about the hardware. It's like Sid. I think actually the only thing he'd be missing is if he did have like 5 Hart trophies. He got robbed of that one at least the year he was injured at the Winter Classic. Because I think he had, at the time, he had a crazy lead in the scoring race. It was something like he had like a 30-point lead in the scoring race. He was getting out of hand. And if I remember correctly, don't quote me on this, but I think he may have still, even after all the games he missed, he was near the top in assists. He was either at the top or a few down, even after missing as many games as he did. Like he had an unbelievable year. And a lot of people think too, that year the Penguins got robbed of the cup. Because like they were winning games. They looked really good. Sid looked unstoppable. So it's weird because Sid accomplished so much, but we still can look back and say, what if?
Like, 100%. That's the most astonishing thing to me about Crosby's career, how it basically had these 2 parts. Like he comes into the league as an absolute phenom, superstar, wins a Stanley Cup pretty early. When did they, I believe they won it in was it 09?
It was 09, lost in the finals in 08. Won it in 09,
so it was the 08-09 season, and he was like 21 at the time. And then Lepore, like immediately after that, he went through all those injuries, like right in his prime. Like think about like Matthews and McDavid, 24, 25 years old. They've been dominating the league for the last 3-4 years. Like that sweet spot when you're from like 23 to 27 is kind of that new prime, right? And Crosby was essentially like robbed of that. Like imagine he had stayed healthy through those years. And then he comes out of that on the other side and has like this second act to his career where he wins 2 more Stanley Cups, wins all these other awards. Like it's amazing, honestly, to look back on Sid's career and think like, oh my God, if this dude stayed healthy, what could have been?
Makes you wonder too, right? Again, I talk about how like hardware, but there's also the thing of like the all-time lists. Had he stayed healthy and played those games, and if we're being fair, when he came back, I mean, you don't come back at 100. It takes some time to get used to the game again, get your eyes back and your feet back for that matter. Where would he be like on the all-time scoring list? Or where would he finish on the all-time scoring list in his career? He'd be near the top. He'd probably retire like top 5 or something had he stayed healthy. And to be fair, like that's an argument against people say, oh, who is the greatest player? I mean, health is part of it.
100%.
Like part of it's luck, but at the same time, I mean, that's sort of an achievement to stay healthy. But it's Sid, man. Sid's my boy. That's the hill I'm dying
on. We're both going with Sid.
It would take a lot, man. It would take a lot for me to put someone above Sid. Like Gretzky's like the all-timer for me, and there will never be one greater than Gretzky. And then I'd say Sid's probably my second favorite player ever. It would take a lot. It would take like Matthews back-to-back Conn Smythe trophies with the Leafs or something to put up the discussion, because I just love the way Sid plays. And
you said it, man. Even though like he's at this point, he's obviously not the same player he used to be. He's still a damn good player. Yeah. But you could still argue that Sidney Crosby is like a top 10 to 15 player in the league, like no questions asked.
I think he was still over a point a game last year, wasn't he?
Yeah. Last year, Crosby had 84 points in 69 games.
Yeah. So I remember some kids, funny, I was in my nephew's locker room and some kid, he's like, oh, Crosby's washed up. I quickly looked up the stats and I'm like, wow, he scored like 80 something points in 60 something games.
He was on like 100-point pace last season.
Yeah, like low key, an incredible season.
Yeah, so he's still an awesome player, but I'm right there with you, Lepore. Like it's going to take a lot. And can McDavid catch him at some point? It's definitely possible. McDavid's entering year 8 this upcoming season.
Already
So
crazy, eh?
he has a long runway to go if we think he's going to play, close to 20 years in the league. So we'll see what happens. Lepore, how about Auston Matthews? Of course, we got to talk about Auston Matthews.
How about Auston Matthews, Bruno?
So we said that McDavid has the belt as the best player in the NHL. I think most people would say, unless you completely despise the Toronto Maple Leafs, and there's a lot of Leafs haters out there, I think most people would say that Matthews has the belt as the best goal scorer in the NHL.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, there's going to be haters that immediately attack us right now and say, oh, Ovechkin's still a better goal scorer. And, someone will even chirp us and say Patrick Laine is a better goal scorer or something stupid like that. But Matthews is the best goal scorer in the NHL. Just go look at goals per game, goals per 60 minutes. Go look at anything. Since he's entered the league, he has been the best goal scorer in the NHL, period. Okay? Just like we did with McDavid and Sidney Crosby, we have to compare Matthews to Alexander Ovechkin, who will probably go down as the greatest goal scorer of all time. And that might just end the conversation right here with me saying that. But down the line, do you think that Auston Matthews will have a better career than Alexander Ovechkin?
This one's really tough for me because how I see it this way. I think, and here comes the hate. I think Auston Matthews is a better player / goal scorer than Alex Ovechkin is. Matthews scores a million different ways. He scores 5-on-5. He plays center. He's a 200-foot center. And he scores a fuck ton of goals. Okay. Ovechkin, I'm not going to use that term calling him one-dimensional because the guy lays hits. He has energy and all that. But I think his game is sort of more, it's not as spread out as Auston Matthews is. On the topic of pure goals, again, I think Matthews is a better goal scorer. And it's kind of funny because you mentioned how Sid had kind of two phases of his career. If you look back to Ovechkin's early days, he would remember the rush goals he would score, like come flying in off the wing, deke out a guy, deke out the goalie.
Oh, yeah, it was
incredible. Like one of the most exciting players.
And he doesn't
ever.
do that anymore.
No, it's just like that shot off the off wing. And I'd like to see like where that kind of switch for him. And again, he's getting older, so those wheels slow down and he adapted, and that's incredible. So, but like overall, I do think Matthews is a better player and specifically a better goal scorer. But to the question of when we look back at the career, we mentioned durability before. And Ovechkin, man, he especially the style he plays, he's never hurt. Like that's the craziest thing. But like people keep pointing out to like, him chasing Gretzky's goal record. And they'll say things like, oh, he's got to stay healthy. He plays every game. Like I'd like to look back at the numbers, but like how many games has he missed over the last few seasons? He's missed a couple because he skipped the All-Star game and you're like suspended for one game. But no, the guy's incredible that way.
Crazy durability.
Yeah. And Matthews gets hurt. So he misses games. So both in the way of how many games will he play to the point of his 30s? And then what will his total longevity be? I'd probably bet on Ovechkin being greater in that regard. So, and Ovechkin's got the cup. He already has all the how many Rockets does Ovechkin have? Like 7?
He's got, I believe, I'm counting right now.
Sure.
He's got more. 9 Rockets.
I was as soon as I said 7, I'm like, I think it might be 9. Like 9
Rockets.
9. Like, here we are with history. Here we are with Matthews pumping that. Like, it's crazy that he got 2. Like, again, over-unders. Is Matthews going to get 7 more Rockets? That's literally like he'd have to play till he's 40 and win one every second year of his career. Think of it that way, man. Think how bananas that is on the side of Ovechkin. The 1 cup, the 1 Conn Smythe. And again, 2, how many hearts does Ovechkin have?
Ovechkin, I'm counting his hearts as well. 1, 2, 3. 3 Hart trophies.
So 3 Hart trophies, 9 Maurice Rocket Richard trophies, a Stanley Cup, a Conn Smythe. I mean, at the end of the day, if he breaks Gretzky's goal record, we're done here. Like it's kind of we're done with any debate as to whether anyone's
you can't argue anything at that point.
No, we're done here. So with the Crosby versus McDavid one, I went with the old. And I'm going to stick with the old with this one. Whereas I think when we do look back, I don't think that we're going to think Auston Matthews had a better overall career than Alexander Ovechkin.
Yeah, I like the point that you made about Matthews being a better player than Ovechkin, just in terms of like being a complete player. And some people might think that sounds insane, but I do agree with you, Lepore, that Matthews scores goals in more ways than Ovechkin does. And again, it sounds crazy to say because Ovechkin is probably going to go down as the greatest goal scorer of all time. But just in terms of all the goals that Matthews can score, right? He can score 2 feet around the net, 5 feet from the net, 20 feet from the net, wrist shot, dekes in close, slap shot if he needs to pull it out, snap shot. Like he has every shot in the bag.
Yeah, and I was going to say, actually, how many like tip goals does Ovechkin have in his career?
That's another thing, right? Even deflections, like Matthews' hand-eye coordination on point shots, like just he scores in every way imaginable. So I just think he's a more like versatile goal scorer. And you could even argue, like I said, that he's just like a better player just in terms of everything he does. And again, you could disagree because like you said, Lepore, Ovechkin is still a very physical guy. Like he's among the league leaders in hits among forwards. He lays the body. He'll do anything it takes to win. Now, in terms of who will have the better career, I agree with you again. I would still bet on Alexander Ovechkin, considering the trajectory that he's on and that he's probably going to pass Wayne Gretzky unless he just decides to retire at some point over the next couple of seasons. He's going to pass Gretzky at some point.
If you bet on it, if you were to bet on it right now, you'd bet that he does.
I'd bet that he does.
Yeah.
I mean, the dude just scored 50 goals last season.
Yeah. What I don't want to see
50 goals again.
I think it's still hard. I mean, I'm not saying you can hear it in my voice. I don't want it to happen because of like my love for Wayne Gretzky. But you hear people say, oh, he's only like 200 behind or whatever. It's like, that's still a lot of goals. Like that's still like, you know, however many seasons of 40 or 50 or whatever. So I think he can have that consistency. I think all it does take is one injury where he misses 30 or 40 games or something. And what I really don't want to see, I really and truly don't want to see, even after he's had a 5-year deal, I don't want to see him continuing to play and be getting like, at an old age, like getting like 10 goals a year, 15 goals a year just to break the record. I don't want to see that.
Yeah, I want to see him like smash the record and have like a 42 goal season,
sure,
which is possible because just last year he scored 50 goals and the dude's 36 years old. It's incredible. Now, another thing we could look at in this conversation is that Ovechkin did not win his first Stanley Cup until year 13 in the league.
For everyone freaking out on the Toronto Maple Leafs and their young stars, pay attention.
His 13th year in the league is when he finally broke through. Now, leading up to that, yes, he did win multiple playoff series. Auston Matthews still hasn't won a playoff series through his first 6 years in the league. But in terms of chasing Ovechkin from like a trophy standpoint, when it comes to Stanley Cups, you know, winning a Conn Smythe trophy, Matthews can obviously catch him. And honestly, Lepore, even the Rocket Richards, listen, I don't think Matthews is going to win 9 Rocket Richards, but over the next 5 to 7 years, if Matthews wins the Rocket 5 times, no one would be surprised. No one would be surprised.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe McDavid squeaks one in or Draisaitl. But over the next 5 to 7 years, Matthews can win half of those Rocket Richard trophies, and not a single person in the league would be surprised. So that would bring him, let's say he wins 3 over the next 7 years. He has all of a sudden 5 Rocket Richard trophies. Now, it's not 9, but at that point, I mean, Matthews is still a young guy, right? So there's still room for him, just like there's room for McDavid to rack up all these trophies. But if you're just looking at what these guys are going to do over the course of their careers, all the trophies that Ovechkin has so far, that trophy cabinet is stuffed. The stats, the goals. I mean, it's Ovechkin. It's going to be hard, man, to surpass the career that Ovechkin has had.
I often say in sports that sometimes we don't realize how good we have it as far as being a fan goes, and we kind of take players for granted. Crosby is one of the best players of all time. I really think that. I think most people would say that, whether you put him top 5, top 10, he's one of the greatest players of all time. Ovechkin is probably going to end up being, or has a very good chance to be the greatest goal scorer we've ever seen. They started the same season. So it's just crazy, like how blessed we've been with being able to watch that and follow that. And then also, I always make the point where, what if one of them didn't exist? Like think of on Ovechkin's side, if Crosby didn't exist, how many times would he have beaten Pittsburgh and gotten further? Maybe they do have another Stanley Cup, or with these trophies, with like or Hart trophies, all that stuff. Like if the other guy didn't exist, the other guy would have got it. Now, like, of course, you can always say that. But I'm saying in terms of this example, you directly have two of the greatest players ever. Kind of like with tennis, how you had Djokovic, Nadal, and Federer all at the same time. You can argue the three greatest players of all time. They weren't spread over 100 years or 50 years or even 20 years. They were playing at the same time. So it's crazy, man. Like the what ifs, right? I mean, the what ifs. And we'd have to look it up to see comparatively season by season how it would have gone. And there's no way of knowing. It's just fun hockey geek stuff, but we're lucky.
Yeah,
man.
it's wild to think about how many cups he would have won, how many more even Hart trophies. Now he has one more Hart trophy than Sid, but maybe he has a couple Hart trophies the years that Sid won, right? Like it's crazy that two of, like, I think we would both say that they're two of like the top 10 greatest players that ever lived at this point. And for both of them to play at the same time it's pretty wild. You could even say they're two of the top, let's say 7 or 8 players of all time.
Right? If someone said seriously, they're both top 5, it'd be like,
even top 5. You could make that argument.
There's a take for sure.
But yeah, we'll see. We'll see if McDavid and Matthews can chase these guys down. I already know Oilers fans are laughing at us and Habs fans are making fun of us right now and all this stuff because everyone thinks that Auston Matthews just isn't that good just because he plays for the Leafs. If he played for like the Boston Bruins, he would be the greatest player of all time at this point.
Yeah. Well.
Anyway, Lepore, we're getting to the end of this thing. Is there anything else you want to get off your chest?
There is one thing I want to get off my chest, Anthony Bruno, and we won't spend a lot of time on it because it doesn't deserve a lot of time. A stat was posted by your boys at Sportsnet the other day on Twitter that caused lots of discussion, and it had to do with Wayne Gretzky. And the stat was that in the 1980s, Wayne Gretzky had more 5-point games than 0-point games. He had 85 5-point games and 74 0-point games. So you have two sides to this. You have the people flying in saying, oh my God, what a stat. Wayne Gretzky was unbelievable. The greatest player, maybe the greatest team athlete we've ever seen. Then you have the other side of people saying, yeah, but he was playing against guys who were like construction workers and should have been like, he couldn't even skate backwards. Like you have that take. And to me, can we just acknowledge the greatness of players of the past? The whole thing, and it confuses me. Like it so confuses me when people do like the comparative thing. Like, oh, Gretzky would be like a junior A player. Yeah, but he played back then. And people point to say him playing against weaker competition than like a McDavid or a Crosby or whatever. But on the flip side, I say Connor McDavid had elite, probably pro level coaching by the age of 10 years old. Do you think Wayne Gretzky got that? No. It was like some guy's dad probably working with him during practice. Equipment. Gretzky using big, thick leather boots, big, thick leather gloves, a wooden stick. That's what he had at the time. So it's not a fair comparison. It's like if Wayne Gretzky had been born now and given these this access that these kids have today with his talent, yeah, he'd still be in the NHL and he'd still be dominating. And also what confuses me is that, do you not see the argument of, well, why was nobody else doing it then? Seriously. It's like, oh, if he's playing against guys who were shit and guys who should have
the only other guy who was putting up numbers like that was Lemieux.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. So it's like, what's the whole thing of, it's like, oh, everyone was, or this and that. And the one stat I always show people, or the one topic I always show people in this discussion is my observation anyway, is it's not about comparing the players directly. You can't compare Gretzky to McDavid simply because, again, what was provided to those players positively and negatively. Gretzky played against weaker opposition, but McDavid had better training facilities, nutrition, all that stuff. And again, like, do people think, and it's across the board, if you put Cristiano Ronaldo in like the 80s he'd score like 1,000 goals. Like he'd be a total cheat code playing against those guys. It is how it is. But
yeah, that's why it's tough to compare eras.
100%.
It's so hard.
And that's why I point to is that, okay, well, that when discussing the greatest athletes of all time, how far ahead of the rest of the pack was that player in his era? Because again, he can only compete against guys in his era. And it was in 1987. If I remember the numbers correctly, Gretzky he won the scoring race and he put up 183 points. Curry was second, his line mate, with 108 points. So he won the scoring race by like a 75% margin. And to that point, Curry probably benefited from playing with Gretzky. And I think Lemieux missed some games that year, so he probably should have been second. But I mean, that's a whole other topic. But people know where I'm going with this. He was that much better than the pack. That much better. It's crazy. It's crazy. And I don't know why people have this like thing about going against athletes of the past. And a great analogy I heard once, it was actually, and bravo, Adam Wilde. Adam Wilde from the Steve Dangle podcast. Because this topic came up when Guy Lafleur passed away. They were talking about, what he pulled off and he was the best player of the 70s. And you have these losers come in, like trying to not give him credit and take away from it. Adam Wilde said, you have a 1950 Ferrari and you have a 2023 like Nissan Altima. What car is faster and better built? Probably the Altima.
Yeah.
It's better.
It's 70 years later with all the technological advancements, right?
So his argument was 1950 Ferrari, 2023 Nissan Altima. Which one's more impressive? The Ferrari's obviously.
Of course, the Ferrari.
Of course, the Ferrari's more impressive. So that because at the time, what the Ferrari was for vehicles of that time compared to what the Nissan is for vehicles of that time. But anyways, like I said, I didn't want to waste too much time on it. Gretzky's my boy, the love of my life. God country, Wayne Gretzky. I felt the need to express how I felt on this one.
No, I agree with you, Lepore. I think there's been some people that have maybe been a little disrespectful towards Wayne Gretzky, and it happens in all sports, right? We all kind of dismiss some of the things that the greats did 20, 30, 40 years ago, even 50 years ago, because it's like you said, we think, they were playing against accountants and plumbers and firemen, right? It's kind of ridiculous. I love that stat you brought up, that Sportsnet stat that they posted, how he had more 5-point games in the 80s than 0-point games. But the stat that just trumps it all, and this is how I'll end this thing, Wayne Gretzky has more assists than the second leading scorer of all time has points. That's literally all you need to know. He has more assists than Jaromir Jagr, who sits second all time in NHL scoring. Wayne Gretzky has more assists than him. Think about that for a second. If that doesn't show you how far ahead he was of everybody else in that era, I don't know what does.
He got 163 assists in a season. That's the record. Think of a guy now, and again, times are different, but like I think 163 points. No, 163 assists. It's crazy, man. It's bananas. Absurd. But and I'll finish with this. Like, my question is always when people say, like who he was playing against, whatever. 4 times Gretzky put up 200 points. 200 points. 200 points. So what? To impress you, he needed to put up 300 points? Like what would be the number that you would have said like, okay. Like he scored 92 goals in a season. Yeah, I know it was in the 80s, but what's he should have scored 150? Like, he should have had 350 points and 150. Like, come on. Like that's where it's all just it's ridiculous.
That he could have done or needed to prove. All the records he holds as well. Like, it's absurd. Wayne Gretzky was unbelievable, and he's the GOAT. He's the GOAT. It's as simple as that.
We need Wayne on the podcast.
Yeah, that's next.
Yeah, life goal. Wayne Gretzky on the. It took Spin Chicklets like 10 years to get him. We'll see how long it takes us to get him.
We might be able to get him by 2057 or something like that, Lepore.
I'm down.
If Wayne Gretzky is still around at that point, if we're still around at that point doing this podcast.
Yeah.
All right, man. That is going to do it for episode 71 of the Gluttons For Punishment Podcast, or GFP, a Toronto Maple Leafs and NHL podcast hosted by Michael Lepore and Anthony Bruno. If you were listening to this episode, audio on one of the audio platforms out there, whether it's Apple, Spotify, all that good stuff, please give us a 5-star rating and review on Apple and Spotify. That would do wonders for us. And if you've been watching us on YouTube and you really enjoy the content, please just take 2 seconds to smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell so you know exactly when the GFP podcast is posting some new content. All right, everybody. For Michael Lepore, I'm Anthony Bruno, and we will see you in the next one.
Thanks, everyone.